Okay, we are on the Hosafos on Daf Nun Dalid on the left-hand column. This is a little bit more of sort of a technical description that the Alter Rebbe walks us through in some inyanim of Hasidus. There's a lot of Mara Makoimis, which I will briefly mention, but we'll try to stick more to the content than to the references and bibliographic notes. So the Alter Rebbe says that afterwards, it is expressed through the kav. The term kav means a line, which is an expression of the infinite light of Hashem. But it's only a very narrow or thin line, which is the source of the light that radiates within the kalim of Atzilus. Again, coming from the infinity of Hashem, it is attenuated to the status that is appropriate there. As explained in other places about the kav that brings from above to below within the worlds. And through this, we have all of the varying degrees of awareness known as the different stages of the olam. And again, of course, the word olam meaning hidden, how hidden or how evident is it? So to understand this idea about above and below, which of course is not spatial, it's similar to what we describe, that we say, Gadol Adonenu, how great is our master, Varav Koyach, how abundant is his power. That as it's explained, that we have the full stature of creation, and it gives us the enormous number, but it's still a number, and it's a description of the investiture of Hashem from Malchus of Atzilus into the world of Yetzirah, through, again, Matat, one of the Malachim, who is called the officer that oversees the world. He's also called a youngster, as it's explained, and here the Alter Rebbe quotes source material to support this idea in the concept of Chanoich Lanara Pidarka, educate a child according to his way, that is according to the capacity of even the Tanoim who mastered Ruach HaKodesh, that entered into the Pardes in the world of Yetzirah. And again, the Alter Rebbe directs us to the Likkutei Torah of the Arizal and Parshas Bereshis, the prophets who understood at the level of Bria, as it says, Yoitze Bereshis, and there is this parsa, this screen, which is considered to be 8,000 amas, and it's the heavens. And again, even though it's an enormous number, but it's a number, it's defined. And this is what the Alter Rebbe points out, again, directs us to the Shalah, Parshas Truma, that even though this is an enormous number, still it is a limited number. And this is only possible once you have kalim, the kalim of Atzilus, that are expressed into the neshama, the 10 spheres of Yetzirah, which is this level of radiating, Hashem expressing himself, but still within a defined characteristic. And again, the Alter Rebbe points us to other source material to support this idea. Now, this is the idea of the uprightness, the idea of the expression from above to below. And again, it's not to be understood spatially, because the idea of the screen, that is the capacity to express this source of life from the Midah of Malchus down into the other levels. And here there's a parenthetical where it explains that the word parsa, which we commonly translate as a screen, also can mean a limitation, a boundary. And the Alter Rebbe points you to source material to support this idea. We find in the Targum that when it describes about the spreading of the curtains over the tent, it's also called a parsa, and other source material as well that support this idea that the word parsa can mean a limitation. What then do we mean when we talk about the uprightness, the length of the expression? The point being that just like in the material world, we have length and breadth, so too in the spiritual world, there is length, which is the process of a shtalshalos, cause, effect, cause, effect. The effect is the product, it is lower than the cause, and the cause is above. This means that it's higher in level. Like the Rambam writes in the Laws of the Foundations of Torah, in chapter 2, that it says that the heavens are above, higher and higher, gavoya mal gavoya. It means that it is higher and lower, just like we would describe one person as being a greater chacham than another. It's not a description of their physical stature, but of their intellectual stature. Or like we say, that cause precedes and supersedes effect, as is explained in other places as well. And again, here the Alter Rebbe brings more source material to support it. And again, a mashal is that when you have a great chacham who now has to communicate an idea to a simple student, he, the teacher, has to invest his seichel in some form of analogy, metaphor, or simile, a mashal, in order that his student should be able to comprehend it. This is called from above, the perspective of the teacher, to below, to the perspective where the student can grasp it, that he invests, the teacher, the depth of his seichel into a metaphor or analogy that is understandable by the student, something of the Gashmis. Now, regarding Shlomo HaMelech, it says that he could teach 3,000 parables on every idea of Torah. That is, for every idea of Torah, spiritual idea, that Shlomo was able to understand with his unique chachma, he was able to express 3,000 stages. They were not obviously 3,000 identical metaphors. Each one of them was a shade different, and all of them were a form of mashal or mechanism for him to communicate the infinity of Hashem that exists and is invested within Torah. And this is what we mean when we describe Torah as having length. And Shlomo, again, was also limited to 3,000. It's a large number, it is a limited number. So too to the highest of levels, like it's again explained in the Alter Rebbe brings other source material. Now we know that when it comes to the concept of a mashal, it is a garment and a mechanism of expression for the lesson that it is trying to communicate. It takes something that is high, out of reach, like we would say in English, and it brings it down into a comprehensible form. However, the source of the mashal, we're now on Amud Beis, is much higher and loftier that nobody else can say a mashal for it except Shlomo. That is, you have to be at the unique, exceptional wisdom level of Shlomo to say. Similarly, the Gemara tells us that when Rameir passed away, there weren't people who were able to make mashalim. Now, of course, everybody uses mashalim all the time. Here we're describing a very particular skill of taking a concept that is high, lofty, out of reach, and making it accessible. Because it is only somebody of the loftiest seichel who can bring it down into something that is most tangible. And again, this is a paralleling and directing a spiritual mashal, which is not the case when a person doesn't have such a lofty seichel, when he cannot explain it as well. And if he says a mashal, it's not going to communicate it as seamlessly, as Rashi explains, and that's why the mashalim say regarding Bilam that he could vayisa mishaloi, and like our sages say in the end of Parshas Nasa and the pasuk, that there was never again a Navi, but who was there in the world, in the nations? There was Bilam. He paralleled Moshe Rabbeinu in that type of clarity, and that's why he was able to say mashalim. So it's not just as we often do in our colloquial speech, but it is this unique skill. So too, somebody who is an exceptional chacham can bring the wisdom down to the most extreme manner. And this is the idea of the abundance of length in the concept of Torah. And therefore, Shlomo said 3,000 mashalim. Again, taking this very narrow kav and bringing it from above to below. That is, it is drawn down, this abundance, down to a place where it is accessible. Because the Chachma of Atzilus, which is the source of human intellect, and through the abundance of Hishtalshlus, this entire process, like we say, that there's no blade of grass here in the physical world that doesn't have a spiritual counterpart that is directing its growth, that is nourishing it from above to below. Similarly, we have the Seichel in the soul, that relative to its origin and its source in Chachma and the 10 spheres of Asiya. And within the 10 spheres of Asiya, there is an abundance level that reaches higher to the Malchus of Yitzira, all the way up to the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Again, everything being tied into that which is higher. And this is why it says, Vayikra Hashem Lekimas Adam, God, by Yetzer, he formed man, alluding to the world of Yitzira, and so to levels higher and higher, and also to the level of the Chachma of Atzilus. And again, the Alter Rebbe points us to numerous other source material to support this idea. And what is the origin of all of this creation? That is the kav and the chut. That is this thread. And that's why we say that the kav is drawn from above to below, that it should be drawn down through the process of a shtalshalis to ein katz v'tachlis, that this is called the oirech. And similarly, as we find in the Eitz Chaim, regarding this idea of the oirich, the length of Torah, that is similar to the power of vision that can spread far greater than the power of hearing, because the power of hearing is only, you can hear noise, speech, sound, and so on. The power of vision can be expressed even to penetrate the physical, because vision is drawn from Chachma. And that's why it says that the wise are considered the eyes of the community. Like the power of hearing is drawn from understanding, from Bina. Vision from Chachma, again, more expansive. Hearing, auditory, from Bina, less so. And the Chachma, the way it is at the highest and loftiest of levels, is drawn down to the lower of levels. And this is that characteristic called Urich Anpin, the expression. As it's described, and again, the Alter Rebbe brings us other source material. And the idea is that since the expression of the Madregas is through the level from the highest, this is, again, alluded to, and the Alter Rebbe brings numerous other source materials to illustrate this point about the partsuf, the combination of these different levels and their interaction between each other that bring them down lower and lower, like the expression of the Urich Anpin, the extension of it. And again, the Alter Rebbe brings more source material. Final paragraph. After all of this, we can now understand a little bit the ideas of Yom Kippur and Sukkot. We explained earlier that when it says within you, ki imcha is the source of forgiveness, that is within you is the source of all life. Ki imcha makor chayim. It is the source of all tainug. Again, we translate tainug as pleasure, but not sensory pleasures, as we will describe. Again, the Alter Rebbe quotes this from the Zohar. And therefore, in Yom Kippur, there is deprivation, because the pleasure that we receive from eating and drinking is from something outside of ourselves. Though on Yom Kippur, through tshuva, we stimulate the very essence of the infinite light. Again, Alter Rebbe brings more source material to support this. And this is what it means, that within you is forgiveness. And that's why there is the absolute prohibition, to the extent that one, God forbid, would be cut off, kares, for violating this and eating and drinking on Yom Kippur. The 5 different forms of deprivation are all from physical material things. And in order for it to allow us to have pleasure only in Hashem, that's why we wear the white garments of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, because white is the very essence. It is not a combination. And this is also what it says, that it is called Shabbos of Shabbases. And yet you should deprive your soul, which of course seems odd, because on Shabbos, the mitzvah is to eat and drink. So on Yom Kippur, which is Shabbos of Shabbases, is higher than Shabbos. Why, therefore, do we on Yom Kippur, the Shabbos of Shabbases, do the exact opposite of Shabbos, and rather than indulge in food, we are required to deprive ourselves of food? But the point being that Shabbos draws down from a level called the Moichin of Abba, that is from the level of Chachma, which is called Eden, like Gan Eden, and pleasure, that is invested within Chachma, like the investiture of the joy that is derived from insight and genius. And this is not a source for the pleasures, because the pleasures come from outside of you. And therefore, down here in this physical world on Shabbos, the mitzvah is to engage in eating and drinking, because Chacham and Bina are called the food that is enjoyed. The level of Shabbos of Yom Kippur, this idea where we are reaching to the very essence, where we can discover forgiveness within the very essence, the source of life. And that's why it is prohibited on Yom Kippur to have pleasure of food and drink, because it is a revelation from a source of joy that is higher than Chachma. Again, the Alter Rebbe quotes Likkutei Torah, where it says, for 6 days you shall eat matzahs, in the second drush over there, and again, other source material. Now, then we come to the 10 days of tshuva and Yom Kippur, through which we have Sukkot that draws down from the level called Makif, like the Sukkah, which surrounds us, and into the Pnimis. It becomes personalized from the Kav. And that's why the Sukkah has to be hollow, up to 20 amas high, which is the level of Kesser, 20 Chaf, Kesser. And this is through the Sukkah we draw down the presence of the Makifim through the 4 species, the Lulav and Esrog, which is the source of the 4 letters of Hashem's name that are drawn down and personalized to become that level we can know God our Father and serve him with a complete heart and a passionate soul.